A quiet morning at a tech headquarters suddenly took a sharp turn when a black woman was stopped at the front desk and told to use the delivery entrance. She said she had a 9 a.m. appointment with the company's CEO, but the receptionist didn't believe her. She mocked her clothes, her skin color, and assumed on her own that she was just a delivery person. Things escalated when the receptionist called security to throw her out, completely unaware that the woman she had just humiliated was a billionaire CEO about to finalize a multi-million-dollar deal with her company. What will happen when the truth is revealed? And what will become of the company if the deal falls through? Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned to see how this story unfolds. Let us know in the comments, what would you do if you were in her position? The morning sky over downtown Chicago was cold and clear, painting sharp lines across the glass and steel skyline. Amara Thompson stepped out of her car, her heels clicking steadily against the polished concrete outside the towering headquarters of Pinnacle Dynamics. She didn't need a driver. She didn't need an entourage. Power didn't need to announce itself. She wore a charcoal gray cashmere coat fitted perfectly to her figure and a simple black turtleneck beneath. No designer labels. No diamonds. Her natural beauty, pulled back hair, and steady eyes were all the presence she required. Her skin, deep brown and luminous in the pale morning sun, seemed to absorb and reflect the light all at once. Her features were elegant, sharp, and composed, the kind of presence that didn't need a microphone to be heard. She paused for a second at the curb, eyes lifting to read the bold silver letters affixed near the top of the tower Pinnacle Dynamics. She knew what this meeting meant. A partnership between Pinnacle and her company, Thomson Quantum Systems, could change the trajectory of the entire AI industry. Her team had worked for months preparing the proposal. This morning at precisely 9, she was to meet CEO Ethan Rhodes to finalize the deal. She crossed the entry plaza calmly. Her breath, visible in the crisp February air, dissolved as she stepped through the revolving doors into the expansive lobby. The interior of Pinnacle was everything one would expect from a multi-billion-dollar firm. Glass walls, high ceilings, abstract sculpture installations, and marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Natural light streamed through a massive skylight overhead, bathing the space in a golden glow. Amara's footsteps echoed as she walked toward the reception desk. She noticed a white man in a navy pinstripe suit step through another entrance just ahead of her. He smiled, and within seconds, the receptionist, blonde, youthful, and alert, offered him a warm, almost chirpy, "Good morning, Mr. Carlson," and a nod of recognition. The man nodded back with a smirk and continued on his keycard, granting access to the elevators without delay. Amara approached the desk, slowing her pace. She gave a soft smile and spoke in her usual composed voice, low and clear. "Good morning. I have an appointment with Mr. Ethan Rhodes at 9. The receptionist, Brooklyn Carter, according to the shiny brass nameplate, didn't look up. Her long acrylic nails tapped quickly on her phone screen. A beat passed, then another. Amara stood patiently, though she felt the first sting of discomfort crawling up the back of her neck. Finally, Brooklyn looked up, her blue eyes scanning Amara from head to toe with unmistakable disinterest. Her brow furrowed slightly as if confused. Then her lips curled, not into a smile, but a half sneer. "Deliveries go around the back," she said flatly. Amara blinked, surprised but still calm. "I'm not here for a delivery. As I mentioned, I have a scheduled meeting with Mr. Rhodes." Brooklyn gave a theatrical sigh and rolled her eyes. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "And your name, Amara Thompson." There was a pause. Brooklyn raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "You got any ID?" she asked. Amara nodded and reached into her coat pocket, pulling out her slim black wallet. She offered her driver's license and business card across the counter. Brooklyn didn't take them. Instead, she leaned back further and tilted her head like a bored teenager. "Sorry, there's no Amara on today's list," she said, clearly not checking anything. Her fingers hadn't touched the keyboard or the monitor. "Perhaps you'd like to double-check the internal schedule," Amara replied, her tone polite but firm. Brooklyn's face hardened. "I said there's no appointment, and you're kinda holding up the line." Amara turned slightly. The lobby was mostly empty. Moments like this had happened before, too many times. But that never dulled the humiliation, the deep, pulsing insult of being judged not by merit, not by reputation, but by skin tone and assumption. Behind her, the lobby was quiet. No one intervened. No one asked if she needed help. That's the thing about these moments. They don't usually come with yelling or spectacle. They come wrapped in professionalism, in politeness, in plausible deniability. Brooklyn Carter didn't raise her voice. She didn't use slurs. She didn't have to. Because when someone thinks you're nobody, they feel empowered to say anything. And how someone treats you when they think you're unimportant, that tells you exactly who they are. Amara's voice remained composed. Could you please call Mr. Rhodes' office or his assistant? He'll confirm. Brooklyn reached for a nearby phone and pressed a button. Security to the front desk, please, she said, eyes locked on Amara. We've got someone causing a disturbance. As she said it, she didn't look away. Her tone was loud enough for Amara to hear. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a public statement. You don't belong here. The words weren't said directly. They didn't have to be. They never did. For a brief second, Amara said nothing. She didn't raise her voice. Her eyes didn't widen. She just stood there still and quiet like a storm gathering just out of sight. She lowered her hand, placing her ID back into her pocket. Then she looked Brooklyn straight in the eye. You're making a serious mistake. Brooklyn shrugged. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. The elevator behind the lobby opened and two security guards emerged. They were big in matching dark uniforms, moving with military-like coordination. Brooklyn pointed. She's not on the list and refuses to leave. She says she has a meeting with Mr. Rhodes. One of the guards, tall white with a square jaw, stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us. Amara remained motionless for a second. I'm not causing a disturbance, she said. I am here for a legitimate meeting. The guard's hand reached gently toward her elbow. She took a single step back, raising her hand. Please don't touch me. Then step this way, he replied. Amara hesitated, then exhaled softly. She could have resisted. She could have demanded they check again. She could have name-dropped, yelled, or called her assistant. But she didn't. Not here. Not now. Instead, she walked calmly between the two guards as they led her toward the main doors. Every step rang in the air like judgment. As she passed beneath the bold silver logo Pinnacle Dynamics, she looked back, once eyes lingering for a beat longer than necessary. There was no rage in her expression, no fear, no pleading, just a calm, measured silence that said, I see exactly who you are. Outside, the wind had picked up. Amara stood near the sidewalk alone, her shoulders straight. A cab rolled by. A man in a hoodie glanced at her and kept walking. She slipped her phone from her pocket, dialed a number she knew by heart, waited for one ring. Then she spoke with quiet clarity. Activate contingency protocol. This partnership is over. She hung up. Then she turned facing the glass tower once more. Her reflection shimmered faintly against its mirrored surface, calm, unwavering, deliberate. Inside, Brooklyn was sipping her latte again, now giggling at a TikTok on her phone. She didn't know, but she would. A few feet away, a taxi stopped at the red light. A pedestrian crossed. The city moved on, oblivious. But inside the tower of Pinnacle Dynamics, the weight of what had just happened began to shift slowly, silently. High above the lobby on the mezzanine level, Lana Brooks had watched everything. She wasn't supposed to be looking down into the reception area. She had stepped away from a conference call, for a moment needing to clear her head. When she first saw the woman standing at the desk, she didn't realize who it was. Not right away. But as security approached, as Brooklyn's voice rose slightly mocking and dismissive, something in Amara's composure made Lana freeze. Then she saw the face. Lana's heart clenched. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. She knew who Amara Thompson was. Everyone in tech did. She wanted to shout, to run down the stairs, to interrupt whatever ignorant display was about to unfold, but her legs wouldn't move. She gripped the mezzanine railing tighter, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. And she watched helpless as the most powerful woman she had ever admired was quietly forced out the front door of the company she had once dreamed of helping to lead. Lana remained frozen long after Amara had vanished from view. Below, Brooklyn returned to her seat, smug and oblivious. In that moment, Lana felt something deep inside her twist painfully. Guilt, shame, anger at herself, at the building, at the silence. She turned back toward her glass-walled office, jaw clenched. Back downstairs, Darren Wolf stood in the far corner of the lobby, sipping a black coffee. The vice president of operations was tall, white, and polished with neatly styled hair and a tailored navy suit that had cost more than most interns' monthly salaries. He'd seen the entire incident. He hadn't moved. When he spotted Amara walking toward the exit, something flickered in his eyes, a faint recognition. But he didn't step forward. He didn't say a word. He simply turned his back and walked toward the elevator. Inside the lift, as the doors closed, he exhaled through his nose and whispered to himself, "That makes things easier." He tapped the screen of his phone and sent a brief message. "She won't be a problem." Upstairs in the executive suite on the 28th floor, Ethan Rhodes was pouring himself a second cup of French roast. The CEO of Pinnacle Dynamics stood near the panoramic windows of his office, staring out across the skyline, unaware of what had just transpired below. He glanced at the time, 8:58. His assistant had confirmed the 9 o'clock meeting earlier that week. He was looking forward to it. The potential partnership with Thomson Quantum Systems could cement Pinnacle's lead in predictive AI across the federal sector. He checked his calendar again. 9 o'clock. Meeting with Amara Thompson confirmed. He smiled to himself and adjusted the cuff of his shirt. Exactly at 9, he walked to the small conference room attached to his office. The room was prepped screen-ready documents, arranged a carafe of cucumber water, and clean glasses in place. He waited and waited. At 9:15, he buzzed his assistant. "Has Ms. Thompson arrived?" There was a pause. "No, sir," the assistant replied. "Reception hasn't notified us." "That's odd," Ethan said, frowning. "She's always on time." He walked out to the hallway, paced for a moment, then returned to the conference room. He picked up his phone and dialed Amara's assistant. It went straight to voicemail. Down in the trading department, 2 floors below the executive wing, a soft chime sounded from the monitoring terminal. The junior analyst stared at the screen, confused. "Hey, Jason, look at this," she said. Her colleague leaned in. On the live ticker, Pinnacle Dynamics stock had dropped 0.2% in the last 5 minutes. Not huge, but abrupt. Unusual. Jason narrowed his eyes. Checked news alerts. Nothing yet. But the shift had begun. Amara hadn't tweeted. She hadn't gone public. She hadn't even called Ethan. She had simply withdrawn her promise. Quietly. Cleanly. And the market, sensitive as ever, had felt the tremor. Upstairs, Lana Brooks finally sat back at her desk, but she couldn't focus. The image of Amara standing there, dignified, composed, and then dismissed, burned behind her eyes. Lana stared at her monitor, but saw nothing. She had wanted to say something, do something, but fear had paralyzed her. Her job, her reputation, her position fragile and earned through grit, in a space that had barely tolerated her. She whispered to herself, "I should have done something." Her eyes stung. Her hands trembled slightly on the keyboard, but she said nothing. Later that morning, in a private corner of the executive floor, Darren Wolf met quietly with one of the directors. He spoke in low tones, masking satisfaction. "I think we should reconsider the deal with Thomson Quantum," he said. "Why?" the director asked. Darren sipped his coffee. "She didn't show up today. No call, no explanation. That says something about reliability." The director frowned. "But she's Amara Thompson." Darren shrugged. "And we're Pinnacle Dynamics." The glass doors of Thomson Quantum Systems closed behind Amara as she stepped into the quiet warmth of her corporate lobby. The scent of fresh orchids and cedarwood floated through the air, subtle, intentional, chosen to reflect the brand's calm strength. She nodded politely to the receptionist, who stood immediately upon seeing her. "Good morning, Ms. Thompson." Amara gave a soft smile and kept walking. Her steps were neither fast nor slow, just steady, as though nothing had happened that morning, as though she had not just been publicly dismissed by a receptionist in front of an entire corporate lobby. But deep down, she knew this morning had changed everything. As she entered the executive floor, her assistant, Laura Martinez, was already waiting by the glass door of Amara's office, holding a tablet, looking slightly unsettled. Amara raised one brow. Laura followed her inside, quietly closing the door behind them. "They called," Laura said. Her voice was careful, not hesitant, but measured. "Pinnacle," their assistant said. "Mr. Rhodes is waiting and wants to confirm if you're still coming." Amara removed her coat, folding it over the back of the leather chair beside her desk. She looked out the window. The skyline stretched wide beyond the glass. Then she turned, meeting Laura's eyes calmly. "No need," she said. "Let them know the meeting is canceled." Laura blinked. "Completely." Amara nodded once. "We're withdrawing all communications with Pinnacle, effective immediately." Laura hesitated, then stepped closer. "Should I prepare a public notice?" Amara didn't answer right away. She moved to her desk, touched the edge of a framed photo of her mother. Then, in a voice as still as a lake, she replied, "Not yet. Let them wonder first." There was no anger in her tone, no tremble in her voice, no need to raise the volume. Her silence, her control, that was what made people nervous. It was also what made her unstoppable. Laura nodded slowly and stepped out. Amara turned toward her desk where a neat stack of folders waited. She didn't reach for them, not yet. Instead, she pulled up the main screen on her desktop and opened the internal dashboard of active strategic deals. At the top of the list, Pinnacle Dynamics pending. She selected it. Status terminated. A small window popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this partnership? She clicked yes without hesitation. Across town, in a darkened corner of a small cybersecurity startup that Thomson Quantum had recently invested in, a quiet alert appeared on the screen of a system engineer. Unusual data activity detected. Internal correspondence flagged. The technician leaned in. A thread of emails routed from a private Pinnacle Dynamics server had just been mirrored through a third-party filter, not externally hacked, leaked by someone within. It took less than 2 minutes for the content to reach Thomson Quantum's legal department. Another 7 for it to land on Amara's encrypted tablet. She tapped the screen once, then twice. She read in silence. Internal messages, jokes, snide comments. One from a mid-level manager read, "The CEO lady from Quantum looks like she walked in from a UPS shift." Another, even worse, included, "No way Rhodes is actually considering putting someone like that at our table." There were emojis, laughter, a short video clip from a security camera showing Amara being led out by guards. She read every word. No change in her face, no outburst, no slam of the table, just the same steady calm. At the end of the email chain, a final message. "Don't worry, she'll crawl back. They always do." Amara placed the tablet down, slowly, deliberately. She folded her hands on the desk, leaned back in her chair, and allowed a small, cold smile to rise at the corners of her lips. They thought they'd buried her. They hadn't realized she was the ground beneath their feet. Back at Pinnacle Dynamics, Ethan Rhodes stood in the center of his office, pacing. Still nothing. He asked his assistant for the 3rd time. "No response yet," she replied, nervous. He checked his watch. "It's been over 2 hours. He stepped into the hallway and motioned for Darren Wolf. "Do we know what happened?" Darren shrugged, feigning confusion. "No idea. I heard she didn't even make it to the lobby. Was she delayed?" Darren glanced away, just for a moment. "Could be anything." Meanwhile, across tech forums and insider message boards, whispers started circulating. An anonymous post from a reliable internal source read, "Thomson Quantum just pulled out of a strategic meeting with Pinnacle. No explanation given, possibly offended." Another user responded, "If Amara walked away, there must have been a reason. She doesn't make impulsive decisions." The comments began to build. By the early afternoon, trade chatter turned cautious. Pinnacle Dynamics' stock dipped again, not sharply, just enough to make people notice. Back inside Amara's office, Laura returned quietly, holding a fresh report. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "you may want to see this." She handed Amara a single printed page. "Investor behavior tracking. Volume shifts. We're seeing the first signs of instability. Words getting around." Amara scanned it, nodded, and placed the page on her desk. Laura hesitated. "Do you want to respond?" Amara shook her head. "Not yet." Laura frowned slightly. "Should we at least alert the press?" Amara smiled. "I said not yet." Then after a beat, she added, "Let them talk. Let the silence do the work." Laura paused, nodded, and turned to leave. Before she exited, Amara said one more thing. "Prepare our public relations team, quietly. I want them ready to move fast when the time comes." That evening, as the sun began to dip behind the skyline, Ethan sat in his office, staring out the window, trying to make sense of what felt off. He hadn't heard from Amara. No complaints, no public statement. But something was wrong, and he could feel it. He opened his email. Just as he began to draft a message to her directly, a new headline popped up in a private investor's newsletter. "Thomson Quantum pulls out of Pinnacle deal. Reason unknown. Market watches closely." He stared at the headline, then leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. A second email came in, this time from a tech journalist. Any comment on the rumored meeting fallout with Amara Thompson? He didn't reply. Instead, he picked up the phone. "Call Brooklyn," he said. His assistant's voice came back hesitant. "She left early today." Ethan's voice darkened. "Find her, and find out exactly what happened this morning." Back in her office, Amara reviewed the email leaks once more. She highlighted a line from Darren Wolf. "No point in partnering with a diversity case. We need real tech leaders." She turned to Laura. "Get our legal team ready. I want these filed by end of week. On what grounds, Laura asked, though she already suspected the answer. Amara replied, her voice cool and unwavering. Defamation, discrimination, breach of good faith. Laura nodded. Should we notify Pinnacle first? Amara looked at her. They'll find out. Eventually. Then she returned to the tablet, scanned through one final message from someone named R. Lawson at Pinnacle's legal department. A question. Is it true Ms. Thompson withdrew? What happened? She didn't bother replying. Instead, she closed the email app and leaned back. Her fingers tapped gently against the desk. A single beat, then another, then silence. And in that silence, a storm was already forming. The boardroom on the 29th floor of Pinnacle Dynamics had never felt this tense. The lights were a little too bright, the air a little too still. People shifted in their seats, exchanging quiet glances. No one wanted to be the first to speak. At the head of the long glass table, CEO Ethan Rhodes stood motionless, arms folded tightly across his chest. His jaw was clenched. He didn't speak right away. He let the silence work on the room. Let it breathe. Let them feel it. Outside the tall windows, the Chicago skyline glittered under a late winter sun, cold and detached like Ethan's mood. Finally, he spoke. Does anyone want to tell me? He began, voice low, almost a whisper. Why our most critical deal this quarter is gone? He scanned the room, his gaze sharp. No one responded. Ethan placed both palms flat on the table and leaned forward. Thompson Quantum Systems pulled out of our partnership without so much as a phone call. No warning. No explanation. They didn't ghost us. They erased us. He let that settle. A director near the middle adjusted his tie. Another scribbled something meaningless in a notepad, avoiding eye contact. Ethan straightened up. And now, he continued, every investor on the East Coast is calling me for answers I don't have. Still silence. Then Ethan slammed his hand down on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot in the stillness. Why? Someone tell me why a receptionist was allowed to turn away Amara Thompson. A murmur rippled around the room. One of the senior VPs looked toward Darren Wolf, who sat casually with one arm draped over the chair beside him, a half smile playing at his lips. Darren didn't move. Where is Brooklyn Carter? Ethan asked, his voice steady now, but laced with steel. She's waiting outside, said the assistant seated at the corner. Bring her in, Ethan ordered. The assistant hurried to the door and opened it. Moments later, Brooklyn Carter stepped in. Her usual smug composure was gone. She looked pale, her blazer slightly wrinkled, and her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes darted around the room as she took a few timid steps toward the center. Ethan pointed at an empty chair across from him. Sit. She obeyed. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. I want you to walk us through what happened this morning, he said. From the moment Amara Thompson entered the building, Brooklyn's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She glanced around the room again, clearly searching for anyone to speak on her behalf. No one did. I didn't know who she was, Brooklyn said finally. She didn't look. She stopped herself. Ethan leaned forward. She didn't look what Brooklyn swallowed hard. She just didn't seem like someone important. Did she tell you her name? Yes. Did she say she had an appointment? She said she had a meeting with Mr. Rhodes at 9 o'clock. Ethan narrowed his eyes. And, instead of checking the schedule, what did you do? Brooklyn's voice dropped. I thought she might be confused, or maybe trying to cause a disturbance. So you called security? She nodded barely, and had her escorted out. Another nod. The room remained dead silent. Ethan's voice dropped even lower. Let me make sure I understand this. A woman shows up, calm, on time, polite, states her name and her appointment clearly. You don't verify anything. You judge her by her appearance and call security. And that woman turns out to be the CEO of the most important tech company we've ever tried to partner with. Brooklyn's eyes brimmed with tears. Her voice trembled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't mean. Ethan raised a hand. I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. Brooklyn stared down at her hands. I didn't think it would. I mean, she didn't even seem upset. Ethan looked around the room. You know what terrifies me most? He asked no one in particular. She didn't argue. She didn't make a scene. She walked out in silence. And now we're watching our entire quarter collapse. He turned back to Brooklyn. You made a decision based on how someone looked. And you may have cost this company tens of millions of dollars. Brooklyn's lip quivered. I didn't mean to hurt the company. No one ever does, Ethan said coldly. From the far end of the table, Darren finally spoke. To be fair, he said casually, we all make snap judgments sometimes. Brooklyn just acted on instinct. She didn't mean harm. Ethan turned toward him slowly. Instinct, Darren shrugged. I mean, she didn't scream or curse. She was probably just trying to maintain security. She wasn't threatened. Ethan shot back. She was uncomfortable with a woman who didn't fit her expectation of important. That's not security. That's bias. A murmur of agreement flickered through the board. Brooklyn's voice cracked. I just thought, someone that powerful would have looked different. Ethan stood completely still for a moment. Then he spoke each word deliberate. You thought power wears labels, shines shoes, wears expensive watches. You thought it shows itself. He paused. But real power doesn't need to be seen. It needs to be respected. At that moment, a notification buzzed on the screen behind Ethan. He turned to look. The IT technician had just patched in an investor newsfeed. The screen displayed Breaking Thomson Quantum confirms full withdrawal from Pinnacle Partnership. Sources close to the company cite internal culture misalignment as cause. Gasps around the table. One of the directors turned pale. Culture misalignment, he repeated. Is that code for discrimination? No one answered. Ethan's voice was quiet now. She didn't file a complaint. She didn't demand anything. She just walked away. He turned to Brooklyn again. That's what people like her do when they've been through it too many times. They don't explain. They just leave and let your world fall on its own. Ethan straightened his tie. This isn't just a receptionist issue. This is a culture issue, and we are going to answer for it. He looked to Brooklyn. You're suspended. Effective immediately. HR will contact you about next steps. Brooklyn stood, tears silently slipping down her cheeks. I didn't think it mattered. Ethan looked her in the eye. That's the problem. She left the room slowly, her heels no longer clicking with confidence. Behind her, the room remained still. Ethan faced his leadership team. Here's what's going to happen. We will issue a statement. We will acknowledge what happened. And we will begin reviewing our hiring and training practices immediately. Someone asked from the side, what if it's too late? Ethan responded without hesitation. It is too late, but that doesn't mean we get to do nothing. He sat down, finally, exhausted. Across the table, Darren tapped something into his phone, quiet as ever. Ethan didn't notice, but Lana Brooks, watching through the glass wall from the hallway outside, did. She had stood there the entire time listening. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her face unreadable. She didn't say anything, but inside her, something was shifting. The mood inside Ethan Rhodes's office was already heavy when his senior assistant, Sarah Mitchell, stepped in without knocking, a clear sign something was wrong. She held a printed folder in both hands, her knuckles white, her voice almost too quiet. Sir, you're going to want to see this. Now. Ethan looked up from his desk. He had barely slept. His eyes were bloodshot. His tie hung loosely like he hadn't bothered to adjust it since morning. He took the folder silently and opened it. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Dozens of emails, all time-stamped, all real. Correspondence between Darren Wolfe, his own executive vice president, and James Caro, CEO of Axis Link, one of Pinnacle's most aggressive competitors. The subject lines alone made Ethan's stomach turn. Strategic undermining timeline suggested delays to Rhodes's initiatives. Proposal to tank. Amara Thompson. Introduction. Ethan flipped through the pages, reading rapidly. Darren had not just shared internal strategic documents. He had laid out a calculated plan. A plan to undermine Ethan's leadership. A plan to discourage the partnership with Amara Thompson. A plan to destabilize Pinnacle from the inside piece by piece. Every email was clear, direct, and damning. Sarah spoke again, her voice low. The IT security team flagged it early this morning. They weren't sure it was real at first, but the email headers are all verifiable. Ethan slammed the folder shut. The noise startled Sarah. Get Darren in here, he said. 10 minutes later, Darren Wolfe entered the CEO's office as if it were any other day. He didn't look concerned, didn't ask what the meeting was about. He closed the door behind him, straightened his jacket, and nodded toward the chair across from Ethan's desk. You wanted to see me. Ethan didn't offer a seat. He stood behind his desk, arms crossed, staring down at Darren. We're going to make this quick, Ethan said. You're not going to lie. You're not going to spin. You're going to explain. Darren tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. Explain what Ethan threw the folder across the desk. It landed in front of Darren with a dull slap. Start with this. Ethan snapped. Start with why you've been coordinating with Axis Link for the past 5 months. Darren opened the folder, slowly scanning the top page. The smirk that played on his face wasn't surprise. It was confirmation. He closed the folder and looked up at Ethan. "You really had no idea, did you?" Ethan's jaw clenched. Darren leaned back unbothered. "Look, Ethan, I've carried this company on my back for years while you played visionary. I made the deals. I handled the politics. And then you start making room at the table for outsiders, people like Amara Thompson, and you think I'm supposed to clap along." Ethan took a step forward, his voice rising. "She was the key to our entire future." Darren chuckled. "No, she was the key to your legacy, not mine." There was a pause. Then Ethan's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You sabotaged the partnership. You fed internal information to our biggest rival. You betrayed your own company for what a title." Darren's eyes hardened. "For survival." He stood now, his posture suddenly sharp. "This isn't about titles. This is about power. And if you were strong enough to hold on to it, none of this would have mattered. But you're not. You let your emotions dictate billion-dollar decisions. You let someone like Amara walk in without vetting her because you were so desperate to look progressive." Ethan slammed a fist onto the desk. "That's enough." "No, it's not," Darren snapped back. "You need to hear this. You think people like her are going to save us. She was going to gut our autonomy and hand us over to a culture we don't even understand." Ethan stared at him, silent now. Darren continued, "I did what had to be done. You think this place falls because of one receptionist gnome. It's already cracking because the foundation's rotting. You built it that way." Ethan stepped around the desk. He stood inches from Darren now, eyes level. "You can justify it all you want, but this wasn't survival. It was treason." There was a knock on the door. Sarah entered again, this time accompanied by 2 members of Pinnacle's internal security team. Ethan looked to them, then back at Darren. "You're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately," Ethan said. "Your access is revoked. HR will follow up with the legal department." Darren smiled, not flinching. "Fine, but remember this moment, Ethan. You can fire me, silence me, humiliate me, but you can't fix what you've already broken. You brought Amara in thinking she'd elevate us. Instead, she exposed what we've been trying to hide." He looked Ethan in the eye. "And I didn't create that problem. You did." The guards approached. Darren didn't resist. He straightened his jacket, picked up his phone, and walked out with the calm of someone who believed the storm had only just begun. Downstairs, the news had already started spreading. Emails were forwarded, screenshots shared. Staff whispered in the elevators. In the cafeteria, in the halls. They read the words with growing disbelief. They read how Darren had mocked Amara in private threads. They read how he had referred to her as a PR stunt. They read how he had pitched her partnership as a threat to Pinnacle's core leadership. It wasn't just betrayal. It was prejudice hidden behind spreadsheets and boardroom jargon, and it had all come from someone they had trusted. Someone who had smiled during diversity meetings. Someone who had praised progress in public, then conspired against it in private. Ethan stood alone in his office now. He looked down at his desk, at the folder, at the name Darren Wolf printed across the top. A man he had mentored. A man he had defended. He sat down slowly, hands folded together, and stared out the window. Oh, it wasn't just about losing Amara. It was about what that loss had revealed. He had thought Pinnacle was ready for the future. Now he wasn't even sure it could survive the present. In her office across the city, Amara Thompson sat in quiet review of her team's internal reports. Laura, her assistant, stood nearby. "We got word from an inside source," Laura said. "The emails were confirmed. Darren Wolf's working with Axis Link. He's being removed." Amara didn't look up. She just nodded. Laura hesitated. "Does it change anything?" Amara finally met her eyes. "No," she said, "because this was never just about him." Laura nodded, understanding. "It's about culture," Amara continued. "It's about who companies choose to protect when no one's watching." She leaned back, her voice steady. "And now everyone's watching." The early spring sun poured through the windows of Thomson Quantum's executive conference room, softening the sharp edges of the glass and steel that framed the skyline outside. Inside, Amara stood at the head of the long walnut table, her tablet in hand, the room silent as she looked over her team. A faint buzz from the monitor behind her displayed a rendering of a building many of them recognized immediately. Pinnacle Dynamics' former headquarters, except now its facade bore a new name in sleek bronze lettering. Phoenix Innovation Center. Amara placed her tablet down and looked directly at her leadership team. "We've closed the deal." For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then a ripple of murmurs, half disbelief and half awe swept the room. You bought Pinnacle's old headquarters?" her strategy director asked, still trying to catch up. Amara nodded. Calm, purposeful, but not to prove a point, she said. "We're not here to gloat. That building once stood for exclusivity and ego. Now we're going to repurpose it for innovation, equity, and impact." She turned toward the screen, letting the image settle into the minds of those present. "This," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "will be the Phoenix Innovation Center, a place where minority-led startups, innovators from underrepresented communities, and young visionaries who were never given a chance will have access to the tools, capital, and mentorship they deserve." The room was quiet again, but this time with a reverence that felt heavy in the best way. Then Laura, her assistant, raised her voice gently. "And who's leading it?" Amara smiled. "I already made the call." Across town, Lana Brooks sat alone on the balcony of her modest apartment. The wind tugged at her curls, now looser since she had let go of the corporate constraints of Pinnacle. She hadn't taken another job yet. After leaving Pinnacle, she'd needed time to breathe, to grieve what she thought her career would be, and to relearn what kind of leader she wanted to become. Her phone buzzed on the small patio table beside her. Incoming call. Amara Thompson. Lana sat upright, her pulse jumping. She picked up. "Ms. Thompson," she said, unsure whether to sound formal or familiar. Just Amara came the warm reply. "And if you've got a moment, I'd like to talk about the future." Lana's heart pounded in her chest. "Of course." There was a pause on the line, but not a hesitant one, just measured, thoughtful. "I'm opening a new venture, a center for innovation, a platform for the people who've spent years being underestimated." Lana stood and stepped inside, slowly closing her balcony door. "I want you to run it," Amara continued. Lana stopped walking. She looked out across her living room at the stack of old notebooks filled with ideas she'd never had the courage to pitch. The bookshelf of leadership manuals she'd read, hoping to earn respect in a room that rarely looked like her. She took a breath. "Are you sure?" Lana asked. "You know what happened. You know I froze that day." Amara didn't hesitate. "I know exactly what happened. I saw someone who wanted to speak, but was trapped in a place that punished people for doing so. And I also saw someone who knew what silence costs." Lana's throat tightened. And now Amara added, "You're free to lead without fear." 2 months later, construction began. The old Pinnacle building, once cold and imposing, buzzed with new energy. Gone were the platinum-plated company plaques and sterile security stations. In their place were open-concept co-working labs, inclusive mentorship lounges, and tech-equipped classrooms. On opening day, Amara stood beside Lana outside the newly minted Phoenix Innovation Center. Media crews circled. Community leaders arrived. Young entrepreneurs, many of them first-generation college students, held folders, laptops, and dreams. Lana took a deep breath, standing at the top of the steps with Amara. "I never imagined this," she whispered. Amara turned to her, calm as always. "I did." Lana looked at her, eyes glistening. "How do you forgive what that place did to you?" Amara shook her head gently. "This isn't forgiveness. This is transformation. We don't erase the past. We build something stronger on top of it." Lana nodded, tears threatening, but she blinked them away. As they stepped up to the podium together, the audience hushed. Amara spoke first. "We are here not just because of what happened," she said, "but because of what we believe can happen when we stop accepting injustice as the norm." Applause. She turned to Lana. "This center will not be led by me. It will be led by someone who stood in the fire and who now has the strength to light the path forward." Lana stepped to the microphone, her hand steady, her voice clear. "I used to believe I had to shrink myself to survive in corporate spaces," she said. "But we're not here to shrink. We're here to expand opportunity, access, and imagination." More applause. "I stayed silent once when I should have spoken," she added. "This center is my voice, and it belongs to everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough." Inside the building buzzed with renewed life. In a room that once held silent tension and backdoor deals now stood a dozen teenage girls of color, listening to a coding instructor explain machine learning. In what used to be Darren Wolf's corner office, a team of formerly incarcerated young men were developing an app to support re-entry and employment. The energy was electric. No one asked where Amara came from. No one asked if Lana was qualified. They looked around and saw results. Back in her office, Lana sat at a new desk. It was simple, no plaques, no trophies, just a framed quote Amara had sent her. "You don't rise by being allowed in the room. You rise by creating one where everyone belongs. Lana looked out the window. The same skyline, but everything had changed. Later that evening, as the last of the ribbon-cutting guests departed and the press vans pulled away, Amara and Lana walked through the quiet halls of the center. So Lana said, "What now?" Amara smiled. "Now we prove them wrong. Every single day." They walked past a group of volunteers resetting the community lab for the next day's first workshop. Amara paused and watched a young black boy adjusting a projector while his sister arranged chairs. "I used to be them," Amara said softly, "and nobody thought I would ever run a company. Now we make sure no one else has to fight that hard just to get seen." It had been 2 weeks since Brooklyn Carter had walked out of Pinnacle Dynamics for the last time. The elevator ride down that day had felt endless. Her phone was already buzzing with notifications before she even stepped off the curb. Now her name wasn't just on her resume, it was on news alerts, blog posts, Twitter threads, and YouTube reaction videos. Receptionist destroys billion-dollar deal in seconds. The face of everyday prejudice. She thought she was just doing her job, now she's unemployable. Brooklyn had never thought her face would be trending, but now it was on full display, not in celebration, but in shame. Her inbox, once filled with corporate updates and meeting reminders, was now filled with silence. Every job application she sent out returned the same vague response. "Thank you for applying. We've decided to move forward with other candidates." She stopped counting after 37. The apartment was smaller now. After she'd been fired, she knew she couldn't keep her old one downtown. Rent was too high, and her savings weren't made for long-term survival. She moved into a second-floor walk-up in a neighborhood she used to joke about cheap floors, no doorman, and walls thin enough to hear arguments 2 doors down. Her once bright wardrobe now sat untouched in her closet. These days, she wore the same 3 hoodies. They felt safer somehow, like armor from the outside world. She avoided eye contact in grocery stores. She turned her face when someone walked past her at the coffee shop. She wasn't famous. She was infamous. One afternoon, while scrolling mindlessly through job boards, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, picked it up. "Hello, Ms. Carter," a firm male voice asked. "This is Stephen Park, attorney for Ms. Amara Thompson." Brooklyn sat up straight. Her mouth went dry. "Yes, I'm calling to deliver a formal notice regarding your conduct on the morning of February 5th. I already lost my job," she stammered. "I thought this was over." "It's not over," the lawyer said, calm but without softness, "because your actions were not isolated. They were symptomatic." He paused. "Ms. Thompson is not seeking an apology. She's seeking awareness. She wants a public record of accountability." Brooklyn's voice cracked. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I didn't know who she was." The attorney interrupted. "That's exactly the point. You didn't know. And instead of listening, instead of checking, you chose judgment." She didn't answer. He continued, "Amara doesn't need you to say sorry. She needs society to understand the cost of being dismissed again and again until one day it shatters something bigger than just one person." There was a long pause. Then he said something Brooklyn would never forget. "Prejudice is a virus. One action, no matter how small, can infect an entire system." The call ended. Brooklyn sat motionless on the couch. She stared at her phone. She stared at the carpet. She stared at the walls. Then she cried. Not the kind of cry she used to fake in high school to get out of trouble. This one came from the pit of her stomach, slow, shaking, uncontrollable. She didn't cry because she was being punished. She cried because she finally saw it. The days dragged on. Old friends stopped replying. A few unfollowed her publicly. Some left comments like karma. "Told you she was always like that. This is what happens when you think you're above everyone else." She didn't fight it. She didn't post a statement. She didn't record an apology video with soft music and forced tears. She stayed silent because there was nothing left to defend. One day, she gathered the courage to visit a staffing agency. The receptionist smiled brightly at her. "Hi, can I help you?" Brooklyn approached slowly, clutching a folder of resumes. "I'm looking for work. I used to work in corporate reception and admin." The receptionist asked for her name and opened the system. After a few keystrokes, her expression changed. "Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like your file has a flag on it from recent press." Brooklyn's throat tightened. "I understand." The receptionist offered a faint, polite smile. "You might want to try smaller firms, maybe somewhere that doesn't monitor media so closely." Brooklyn nodded and turned away. As she stepped outside into the wind, the truth pressed down on her chest. She wasn't just unemployed, she was unwanted. That night, her phone rang again. This time, it was a reporter. "I'm doing a story on redemption," the woman said. "I'd like to talk about your side." Brooklyn almost hung up, but something in her paused. She agreed. The next day, she sat on a bench in a quiet park across from a camera. No lights, no stage, just her, a recorder, and one question. "Do you regret what you did?" Brooklyn looked away for a long moment, then answered, "I regret that I looked at someone and decided they didn't matter." She kept her voice steady. "I regret that I didn't listen when she spoke, that I thought being polite was enough when what she needed was respect." She took a breath. "And I regret that it took losing everything for me to finally see it." The interview aired, quietly, without sensation. It didn't go viral, but a few people watched. Some saw a woman trying to learn. Others saw a reminder of what happens when you let arrogance lead the way. Brooklyn didn't read the comments. She didn't expect forgiveness. What she wanted now was something different, to be useful. A week later, she applied to volunteer at a small neighborhood outreach center, one that helped young job seekers with resume training and interview prep. At first, the manager looked hesitant. "I've read your name in the news," she said. "Why do you want to be here?" Brooklyn didn't flinch. "Because I've hurt people by not understanding them, and now I want to do better by helping others feel seen." The manager studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You can start Monday." Brooklyn showed up that Monday. And the one after. She didn't talk about Pinnacle. She didn't talk about Amara. She helped rewrite resumes. She practiced mock interviews. She listened to kids who reminded her of people she had once dismissed. And slowly something inside her began to shift. Not guilt, responsibility. She didn't ask for sympathy. She asked for the chance to serve. At Phoenix Innovation Center, Amara and Lana heard about her volunteer work. Laura brought in a short article from the local paper. "She's helping now," Laura said, quietly. Amara looked at the headline. She didn't smile. She just nodded. Then she said softly, "Growth doesn't erase the pain, but it can prevent the cycle from continuing." The late morning light filtered gently through the front atrium of the Phoenix Innovation Center. The once sterile halls of the former Pinnacle Dynamics building had transformed into vibrant pathways of possibility, lined with colorful artwork, polished floors buzzing with the footsteps of dreamers, and glass doors that no longer locked people out, but welcomed them in. At the center of it all stood Lana Brooks. Dressed in a dark green blazer, natural curls free and full, she paced the second-floor balcony overlooking the main entrance, the same balcony she had once clutched in silent agony, watching Amara Thompson be humiliated and pushed out. But now the weight in her chest was different. Heavier, yes, but heavier with purpose, not fear. Below her, a group of young interns filed in, laughing, excited, nervous. She smiled. They reminded her of who she once was. Just an hour earlier, Lana had been in her office finalizing the details of a new leadership curriculum, a program aimed at helping young professionals of color navigate corporate spaces with authenticity, resilience, and strategic clarity. It was a project she had envisioned years ago, but never dared propose. Not back then. Not when silence was safer. Now she had a team, a budget, a building, and full trust from the woman who had once inspired her simply by walking with dignity when the world tried to drag her down. Later that afternoon, Amara stopped by Lana's office unannounced. She didn't knock. She never had to. Lana looked up from her desk and smiled. "Hey," she said, standing. "You busy?" Amara asked, stepping inside with a casual grace that always carried weight. "Always," Lana joked. "But for you, never." Amara sat across from her. "Sure." She studied Lana for a moment, not just her outfit or her posture, but her energy. "You've changed," Amara said. Lana raised an eyebrow. "Good, changed." Amara nodded, slowly. "You used to fold your hands when you spoke. You don't do that anymore." Lana smiled faintly. "I used to hide in every conversation. Now I've learned how to take up space." Amara leaned back in the chair, proud. "You've built something remarkable here, Lana. This place is alive. It's honest. It's everything the old building never was." Lana glanced down at the papers on her desk. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm not ready." Amara stood and walked toward the window, gazing down at the bustling courtyard where students were setting up for a coding competition. She spoke without turning around. "I once watched you standing on a balcony above me, silent, holding back tears." Lana's breath caught. "I remember." Amara turned to face her, and I also remember thinking, if she ever finds her voice, she'll change the world. She stepped forward, placed a hand gently on Lana's shoulder. You don't need my guidance anymore. You never really did. Then her voice softened. It's time, Lana. Full reins. I'm stepping back. Lana blinked, stunned. All of it. Amara nodded. This center belongs to you now. Make it something the next Lana won't have to hide in. That evening, Lana walked alone through the building. Not to inspect, not to manage, just to feel. The laughter from the media lab, the hum of machines in the startup zone, the buzz of young creators pitching ideas in the open glass lounge. Each sound told a story, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was standing in someone else's dream. This was hers. The following week, the Phoenix Innovation Center launched its flagship mentoring program, Lead Loud. It paired young Black and brown professionals with industry veterans mentors who understood not only how to climb, but how to hold the door open behind them. Lana stood at the front of the first orientation session, microphone in hand, 40 students seated before her. She didn't read from a script. She didn't need to. When I was your age, she began, I thought leadership meant pretending I wasn't scared. The room quieted. I thought I had to dim my light so I wouldn't make others uncomfortable. I believed staying silent was professional, respectable, safe. She paused. And then one day I watched a woman get treated like she didn't belong, and I did nothing. No one moved, but silence doesn't protect us. Lana continued, it buries us. It erases us one moment at a time. She scanned the room, locking eyes with student after student. I'm not here because I was perfect. I'm here because I survived my own silence. And now, it's your turn to speak. Applause followed, real unforced emotional. Several students stood. Some wiped tears. Others nodded quietly, as if finally hearing something they'd been waiting their whole lives to hear. Back in her office, Lana received an email that made her pause. Subject speaking request. National Leadership Summit on Equity and Innovation. They wanted her to keynote. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the message for a long moment. She wasn't just leading a building anymore. She was becoming a voice, a presence, a leader. Weeks later, the Phoenix Innovation Center was highlighted in national media as one of the top spaces for minority innovation in the country. Mentorship stories went viral. Scholarships doubled. Investment offers poured in. But Lana never lost focus. Her mission wasn't fame, it was access. One evening, as she closed up her office, a janitor walked by a middle-aged Black man with gray at his temples and quiet eyes. He paused at her door. You're doing something good here, he said. Lana smiled. I hope so. He nodded. I've cleaned this place since it belonged to Pinnacle. Back then, they never even looked at me. Now, they invite my niece to pitch her business here. Lana's heart swelled. That's the goal, she said quietly. He tipped his head. Thank you. It was just past 9 in the morning when Amara Thompson stepped through the polished stone entrance of the United States Capitol. She wore no flashy colors, no visible logos, just a crisp navy pantsuit, a notebook in one hand, and a quiet resolve that filled the marble corridors with more weight than any news crew outside could capture. For years, she had walked into boardrooms and been questioned. Today, she walked into Congress and was welcomed. In the main chamber rows of representatives and invited guests were already seated. C-SPAN cameras were rolling. Analysts were tweeting in real time. In the past year, the Phoenix Innovation Center had become a lightning rod for national discussion about equity access and the future of minority leadership in technology. But none of that was what mattered most to Amara. She stood at the podium, took a breath, and scanned the room. Not with nervousness, but with a calm that only comes from having been doubted and dismissed enough times to stop being afraid. She leaned into the microphone. Justice, she began, is not revenge. It is not public shaming. It is not burning something down. The room hushed. It is the act of building what didn't exist before and inviting others in. Amara's words didn't echo. They settled. They rested on the shoulders of every intern in the balcony, every entrepreneur watching the live stream, and every community leader who had once been told their dream was too different to be funded. Behind her speech, a movement was underway. The Phoenix Fund, launched just 6 months earlier, had already invested in over 300 minority-led startups. Some were developing education platforms for underserved schools. Others were building green infrastructure in neighborhoods no one had touched in decades. It wasn't about token support. It was a system, a pipeline, a plan. After her speech, as reporters gathered outside, Amara was asked, "Do you think Phoenix is the new model for tech equity?" She smiled. "No," she said. "I think it's the model that should have existed all along." Back at the Phoenix Innovation Center, Lana Brooks sat in a roundtable session with 6 young founders from across the country. One was a Black woman developing AI tools for the medical field. Another, a first-generation Latino immigrant, had just secured his first government contract. Each of them had stories of rejection, of being told not yet, not ready, or simply not the right fit. Now they were leading teams, hiring staff, and pitching at global summits. And all of it started with a place that said, yes. Lana tapped the table gently and looked around. "You all don't need this center to succeed," she said. "You just needed it to start." They nodded, not with bravado, with belief. In the months that followed, Amara's congressional speech interest in the Phoenix model exploded. Major universities requested partnership programs. Venture capital groups started reevaluating their portfolios. The term equity by design, coined by Phoenix, became a standard for measuring inclusion in innovation. Amara and Lana refused to let it become just a trend. They built frameworks, published playbooks, trained other cities. This wasn't about branding. It was about replication. They wanted this model in Atlanta, in Detroit, in Tulsa, in Southside Chicago, in forgotten corners that never made it to Silicon Valley pitch decks. 1 year later, the Phoenix Fund celebrated a milestone. 300 startups funded, 68% of founders from underrepresented communities. 30,000 jobs created. None of it made the cover of flashy tech magazines, but it changed lives. In a quiet interview with a local podcast, Amara was asked how it all began. She paused, then said, "It began with being underestimated, a beat, and it continued with people staying silent." She leaned in, but it flourished when one voice turned into many. At the Phoenix Annual Gala, Lana took the stage. The event hall was filled with alumni, investors, students, and community elders. On one wall, a massive digital screen displayed photos of the businesses Phoenix had launched: coffee shops in formerly red-line neighborhoods, apps made by formerly incarcerated youth, clean energy startups led by women. Lana stood before them, all steady and sure. "We've rewritten the story," she said. Applause. "But we're not done. Because there are still too many young people thinking they have to change who they are to be accepted. We're here to tell them you don't have to change to fit the system. We'll change the system to fit you." Standing at a corner table, Amara clapped slowly, proudly. Her eyes weren't on Lana, though. They were on the next generation, a group of teenagers seated near the back, wide-eyed, inspired, maybe even ready. Outside the gala, under the soft streetlights, Amara stood alone for a moment, hands in her coat pockets. Lana approached quietly. Still thinking, she asked. Amara looked out at the glowing building behind them. "No," she said, "just watching." Lana followed her gaze. The Phoenix Center shimmered, not with luxury, but with life. With light in rooms that used to be locked. With ideas that used to be ignored. "We did it," Lana whispered. Amara turned to her. "You did it. I just made sure no one got in your way." The early morning light slanted through the windows of the small community center on the corner of Franklin and Monroe. It was nothing like the corporate lobbies Brooklyn Carter used to walk through. No glass sculptures, no marble floors, no suits. Just folding chairs, the faint smell of burnt coffee, and the kind of quiet hope that doesn't need luxury to feel real. Brooklyn stood near the registration table, straightening a stack of clipboards. She wore a simple navy sweater, hair tied back, no makeup. Nothing about her drew attention, and that was exactly how she wanted it. This was her 3rd month serving at the center, not by choice at first. Her court agreement, negotiated through a public apology, and the influence of Amara Thompson's legal team, had stipulated community service instead of financial penalties. But by now, something had shifted. She showed up on time. She stayed late, and she listened more than she spoke. That day marked the beginning of a new session, a 10-week mentorship program for young adults who had faced discrimination in schoolwork or housing. Brooklyn had helped organize the materials, coordinate the lunch deliveries, and most importantly, prepare herself to stand in front of a group that would probably recognize her face from the news, and not for good reasons. At 10 a.m., people began to file in. A few looked around cautiously, scanning the room with guarded curiosity. One young man, maybe 19, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, headphones around his neck. Another young woman in a wheelchair wheeled herself into the front row, nodding politely to Brooklyn as she passed. Brooklyn nodded back, heart thudding. This wasn't her redemption arc. It was their day. She was just here to help it happen. In the back of the room, Amara arrived without announcement. She didn't walk through the center like someone important. She didn't expect to be noticed. She simply took a seat in the last row, folding her coat over her lap, hands clasped. She watched as Brooklyn stepped forward to open the program. No one gasped. No one walked out. Brooklyn cleared her throat, then looked across the small group. "I want to welcome you all," she said. "This program is yours. We're here to help you grow, but more importantly, to remind you that you've never been invisible." She looked toward the young man against the wall. "You matter, even if someone once told you otherwise." He raised an eyebrow but didn't look away. She turned to the girl in the front row. "You belong here. You always have." A silence fell, but not a cold one. It was the kind of silence where people begin to lower their defenses. Brooklyn took a breath. "I used to think I understood people, that reading someone's clothes, their posture, their accent, was enough to know who they were." Her voice trembled slightly. "I was wrong. And that mistake hurt more than just one person. It hurt a lot of people, including myself." She didn't cry. She didn't ask for sympathy. She simply stood there, present, accountable. "I'm not here to fix what I did," she said. "I can't, but I'm here to show up, to listen, and if I can, to help." From the back row, Amara listened, unmoving. No emotion crossed her face, but her breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed. No grudge, just quiet recognition. After the session, as volunteers helped clean up, Brooklyn moved slowly through the rows of chairs, checking for left-behind papers. She didn't notice Amara approaching until she heard the quiet shuffle of footsteps behind her. "Au revoir." She turned. There was a beat of silence. They stood face to face, years of history compressed into a moment. Brooklyn didn't speak first. Amara's voice was soft, steady. "You're still here." Brooklyn nodded. "I am." Amara looked around the modest room. "It's different from where we last saw each other." Brooklyn offered a slight smile. "That was a long walk down." Another silence. Then Amara said something that stopped Brooklyn in her tracks. "I never wanted to ruin your life." Brooklyn's throat tightened. "I know," she said. "You wanted people to understand the cost of what I did." And they did. Especially me. Amara stepped closer. "I watched you today. You weren't performing." Brooklyn shook her head. "I'm tired of performing." Amara studied her for a long moment, then said, "Good." They didn't hug, they didn't swap numbers, but in that moment, forgiveness didn't need to be spoken. It was understood. Weeks later, Brooklyn still served at the center, not because the court required it, but because she wanted to stay. She began helping design a workshop on recognizing unconscious bias. Not to teach it, but to start the conversation she had once been too blind to see the need for. She no longer flinched when someone asked her what happened. She told them the truth. She didn't defend it. She used it. At the Phoenix Center, Lana included Brooklyn's new program in a citywide outreach initiative. Some objected. "She was the one who started it all," someone said in a board meeting. Lana calmly replied, "And now she's helping make sure it never happens again." Silence followed, then quiet agreement. At the next spring graduation ceremony, Amara stood once again in the back row. The Phoenix Center auditorium was full, families, mentors, city leaders. A young woman took the stage and spoke about how she used to be ignored at job interviews until someone from Phoenix helped her build confidence and skill. She looked out into the crowd and said, "I used to think justice was about revenge, but now I know it's about making sure no one else has to go through what you did." Amara smiled. Her eyes shimmered not with tears but with clarity. The work wasn't done. It never would be. But it was moving forward. And that mattered. Outside, the sun cast a warm glow over the city skyline. Inside the center, the next group of students was already gathering. New faces, new dreams. And somewhere near the entrance, Brooklyn greeted them with a clipboard and a genuine smile. No spotlight, just presence. And that was enough. The journey of Amara, Lana, and even Brooklyn has quietly reminded us that healing takes time, and change begins with a choice not always loud, but always brave. It showed us that sometimes the most powerful transformation comes not from fighting back, but from choosing to build something better, to listen deeper, and to lead with empathy. Maybe you've been in Lana's place watching injustice and feeling the weight of silence. Or perhaps you've been where Brooklyn stood, realizing too late how a moment of judgment can leave a lasting mark. Or maybe like Amara, you carry strength in stillness, choosing to lead by lifting others. What part of this story stayed with you the most? We'd love to hear your reflections in the comments below. Your voice matters here. And if this story made you think, moved your heart, or helped you see something differently, we invite you to gently tap the like button, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing stories that uplift, awaken, and remind us all of what truly matters. Thank you for walking with us and for choosing compassion in a world that deeply needs it.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.